There's a moment that almost nobody talks about. Not when you're young and hungry. Not when you're still chasing attention. Not when the world keeps telling you that your best years are ahead. It happens later. Usually in silence. You wake up one morning, look at your own life, and realize something terrifying. You did everything people told you to do. And you still feel empty. You worked. You sacrificed. You stayed loyal. You stayed responsible. You stayed quiet when life humiliated you. And somehow, the reward for all of it became exhaustion. Not freedom. Not peace. Just exhaustion. This is the part nobody warns you about. Because modern society has created a dangerous illusion. That if you keep performing long enough, eventually you'll feel fulfilled. But many people reach their 40s or 50s and discover the truth too late. They built a life that looks respectable from the outside, while slowly abandoning themselves on the inside. And the worst part? Most people around you don't actually want you to wake up. Because the moment you stop blindly participating in the system, you become difficult to manipulate. In this video, we're going to break down the hidden psychological crisis that hits millions of people in midlife, and why Stoic philosophy may be one of the only things strong enough to help you survive it without becoming bitter, desperate, or emotionally numb. We'll talk about why aging creates panic in modern society, why regret becomes psychologically violent in midlife, how fake success traps people for decades, and why some people become mentally stronger after 45, while others quietly collapse. And near the end, I'll share one Stoic realization that completely changes the way you look at aging, failure, and the fear of running out of time. Because the real danger of midlife is not getting older. It's waking up one day and realizing you never truly lived. Welcome to Silent Authority. Part 1, The Invisible Panic of Modern Life. Most midlife crises do not begin dramatically. There's no movie scene. No sports car. No screaming breakdown in the rain. Most begin quietly. A man sitting in his car after work, staring at nothing before walking into his house. A woman scrolling through social media at 1 a.m., comparing her exhausted reality to strangers pretending to live perfect lives. Someone laughing at dinner with friends, while secretly wondering, is this all my life is going to be? That question is more dangerous than people realize. Because once it enters the mind, it changes how you see everything. Suddenly, your career feels less meaningful. Your routines feel mechanical. Your relationships feel transactional. You begin noticing how much of modern society depends on performance. Smile here. Pretend there. Post this. Hide that. Look successful. Look confident. Look happy. Machiavelli understood something brutal about human society centuries ago. Most systems do not reward authenticity. They reward usefulness. And once people no longer feel useful, panic begins. This is why aging terrifies modern culture. Not because wrinkles matter that much, but because society quietly conditions people to believe their value decreases with time. Especially if their identity was built on appearance, status, achievement, approval, or productivity. The modern world constantly whispers, you are only valuable while you are winning. That message slowly poisons people, especially in midlife. Because by then, reality begins stripping illusions away. Your body changes. Your energy changes. People stop validating you the same way they used to. And suddenly, you are forced to face a terrifying question. If external success disappears, who am I without it? This is where many people collapse emotionally. Not because they are weak, but because they spent decades building an identity around external applause instead of internal stability. Stoicism begins exactly here. Not with motivation. Not with positivity. with truth. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." Most people hear that and feel uncomfortable. But Stoics understood something modern culture avoids completely. Awareness of mortality creates clarity. Because once you realize time is limited, fake priorities start looking ridiculous. The endless comparison. The need to impress strangers. The obsession with status symbols. You begin seeing how much energy people waste trying to appear important instead of becoming peaceful. And that realization changes everything. Part 2, the regret that destroys people. One of the darkest parts of midlife is not failure. It's memory. People begin replaying old versions of themselves. The career they never pursued. The relationship they stayed in too long. The risks they were too afraid to take. And slowly, regret becomes psychological torture. What makes this worse is that modern culture constantly reopens the wound. Social media makes people feel late. Too old. Too behind. You see someone becoming successful at 28. Someone retiring at 40. Someone traveling the world while you're sitting in traffic wondering where your life went. But Stoicism teaches something extremely important. Comparison destroys peace because it forces you to measure your internal life against someone else's external image. And most external images are performances. Many people online are deeply unhappy behind the scenes. But society rewards appearances more than emotional truth. So people become actors. Even in their own lives. This is why many people reach midlife emotionally disconnected from themselves. They spent years performing competence instead of building fulfillment. And eventually the performance becomes exhausting. You see this everywhere. People staying in careers they hate because the salary looks impressive. People staying in relationships that emotionally died years ago because divorce would look bad. People buying things they don't even care about just to maintain social status. This is not freedom. It is sophisticated imprisonment. And the cruelest part? Society often celebrates it. Seneca once warned that people suffer more in imagination than reality. Midlife magnifies this. Because people begin imagining alternate timelines. If only I had. If I started earlier. If I chose differently. But the Stoics believed regret becomes dangerous when it prevents action in the present. The past cannot be negotiated with. But your future still can. That realization matters deeply. Because many people unconsciously surrender after 40. They stop evolving. Stop dreaming. Stop rebuilding. They quietly decide. This is just who I am now. But some of the strongest transformations happen later in life. Because pain eventually forces honesty. And honesty is where real change begins. Part 3, the moment you stop chasing approval. There's a psychological shift that happens when people suffer enough disappointment. They begin seeing how conditional society can be. People praise you when you're useful. Ignore you when you struggle. Celebrate you when you succeed. Disappear when you break. At first, this realization feels depressing. But eventually, it becomes freeing. Because you stop expecting emotional salvation from external validation. And that changes your entire nervous system. You become calmer. More selective. Less desperate to prove yourself. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of Stoicism. Stoicism is not emotional suppression. It's emotional independence. A Stoic does not become cold because they hate people. They become disciplined because they understand people are unstable. Public opinion changes constantly. Approval is temporary. Crowds are emotional. And building your identity around unstable people creates unstable emotions. Modern society trains people to become addicted to attention. Notifications. Likes. Recognition. Visibility. But attention is not the same thing as respect. And respect is not the same thing as peace. Many people become highly visible while quietly losing themselves. That's why midlife becomes psychologically important. Because eventually people become too tired to keep pretending. The performance cracks. And beneath it, they finally meet themselves. Sometimes for the first time in decades. This is where Stoicism becomes powerful. Because instead of asking, "How do I impress the world?" Stoicism asks, "Can you still respect yourself when nobody applauds?" That question changes a person. Especially after years of chasing validation. Part 4, Why some people become stronger with age. Not everyone breaks during midlife. Some people become extraordinarily powerful. Not louder. Not more arrogant. Stronger internally. You can usually recognize them immediately. They move slower. React less. Need less validation. Speak with clarity instead of emotional chaos. Life humbled them enough to remove illusions. And strangely, that made them calmer. This is one reason Stoicism resonates deeply with older audiences. Because after enough suffering, people stop wanting fantasy. They want truth. And truth often sounds quieter than motivation culture. The Stoics practiced something called voluntary discomfort. Cold weather. Simple food. Physical discipline. Not because suffering is glamorous. But because controlled discomfort builds psychological stability. Modern society does the opposite. It teaches endless comfort seeking. Avoid discomfort. Avoid silence. Avoid boredom. Avoid reflection. But constant comfort weakens people emotionally. That's why many people panic the moment life becomes uncertain. They were never trained to tolerate hardship mentally. Midlife changes this. Because eventually life forces discomfort anyway. Aging. Loss. Health scares. Financial pressure. Loneliness. Change. And people discover two possible paths. Bitterness. Or resilience. The people who grow stronger usually develop one crucial ability. Acceptance. Not passive surrender. Clear-eyed acceptance. They stop arguing with reality. They stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" And begin asking, "What must I become to handle this with dignity?" That shift is life-changing. Because suffering becomes less personal. And more transformational. Part 5, The Truth About Time. Here is the realization most people avoid until it's too late. You were never supposed to stay young forever. Modern society treats aging like failure. But Stoicism sees aging differently. Aging reveals what was always there underneath. Some people become wiser with time. Others become more resentful. Time amplifies character. That's why some older people radiate calm authority, while others radiate frustration. One accepted reality. The other fought it constantly. And maybe that is the deepest lesson of midlife. You cannot control time. But you can control whether time deepens you, or destroys you. The Stoics believed peace comes from alignment. When your actions match your values, inner conflict decreases. That's why many people feel trapped in midlife. Their external life no longer matches their internal truth. And eventually the mind rebels. Anxiety increases. Restlessness increases. Emotional numbness increases. Not because they are broken. But because something inside them knows they abandoned themselves years ago. The beautiful part is this. It is not too late. Not at 40. Not at 50. Not even later. Human beings are capable of radical psychological reinvention. But only after honesty. And honesty requires courage. The courage to admit what no longer fulfills you. What you tolerated too long. What identity no longer fits? And what kind of life actually matters now? That is not weakness. That is awakening. The second life. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Most people think life is about achievement. But eventually many discover something deeper. Peace matters more than performance. Clarity matters more than applause. And authenticity matters more than status. Midlife is painful because illusions die there. But maybe illusions were supposed to die. Maybe the breakdown was never punishment. Maybe it was the beginning of finally seeing clearly. The Stoics understood this thousands of years ago. Life becomes lighter when you stop fighting reality. When you stop needing everyone to validate you. When you stop measuring your worth through comparison. And when you finally understand that your value was never supposed to come from society in the first place. If you're going through a difficult season right now, feeling behind, emotionally exhausted, or quietly questioning your entire life, you are not alone. And you are not finished. Sometimes the strongest version of a person appears after the illusion collapses. Not before. Because wisdom rarely comes from comfort. It comes from surviving what almost broke you, without losing yourself completely. If this video spoke to something you've been carrying silently, subscribe to Stoic Craft for more deep psychological and Stoic insights designed for modern life. And in the comments, tell me honestly. What changed the way you see life the most, success, or suffering?